This is Andi Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm joined by Mike Coppinger out here in Texas. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing great. Great to be back at a big fight. This is definitely the biggest fight week that we felt since, Fury Wilder last year?
It certainly is. And I mean, just for yourself, Mike, having worked through the past 14 months or so of a pandemic, what's it feel like, or how does it feel like to be back in and amongst a big fight feeling?
It's a great feeling. This is like what we do this for, right? I mean, I think the last time I was even in Dallas was Mikey Garcia, Jesse Vargas. That was the last fight I covered before the pandemic started. That wasn't like this. I mean, this is, we can see the stadium in the background, 70,000 going to be here tomorrow, and it's been a great atmosphere. I mean, Tyson Fury has really made this fight hotel fun.
We'll come on to that shortly, but just with regards to the fans being back, how big of an event this is, how crucial and big do you feel it is for the sport to have this type of fight on at this stage when things seem to be getting a lot better in and around the COVID situation now?
I mean, it's everything for boxing. Boxing is an event-driven sport. It's not like the UFC, which everyone watches every week. People watch the big events in boxing, at least in the U.S., and it's great that we have the biggest star in the sport, Canelo Alvarez, and guy in Billy Joe Saunders, who's a great personality, has the English fan base. I think when you have the English fan base plus the biggest star in the sport, that's a great recipe.
Now, Mike, obviously Billy Joe and his team have certainly had a few interactions with Canelo's team throughout the week down here in the lobby. From your view, what have you made of it?
I think Billy Joe's trying to get under Canelo's skin. I don't really believe that Billy Joe's ever going to leave over a ring size. I think it was all mind games and trying to do his best Bernard Hopkins impersonation. But I think it's been great because Canelo's showing more of his personality now. We see him cursing. I think Canelo enjoys it.
I know you said, just going back off what you said there, sorry, do you think there is any possibilities that Canelo will be slightly frustrated or annoyed by what Billy Joe has been doing?
Nah, not at all. I mean, Canelo's a pro. Does he maybe fight a little more aggressively at times because of all the animus? Sure, but I don't see it really affecting him in a negative way.
Obviously, Tyson Fury being here as well. What have you made of seeing the Gypsy King in and around the hotel? And do you think that's another little key component for Billy Joe? Because with Canelo, he's a pound-for-pound star. Many consider him best in the sport. He has his own aura about him, though. You've got one of the world heavyweight champions here. That can take some of the shine away from Canelo. Do you think it's a nice little kind of component for Billy Joe to have throughout this fight week?
I mean, I would say we have the heavyweight champion here, but I think it's been everything for Billy Joe. I mean, it's his childhood friends. It is the biggest personality in boxing, and he's been in rare form this week. Have you seen? I mean, he's whipping everyone into a frenzy. I was just sitting with heavyweight contender Adam Kovnatsky, and Fury came over, and he has a great memory. He goes, "Oh, Adam, you fought on my undercard back in 2013 when I knocked out Steve Cunningham." And he's like, "Don't lose too much weight. We saw what happened with Andy Ruiz." I mean, Fury's great when he's on, and he's been on this week, and it's got to make Billy feel confident, having that guy in your corner saying you're going to win, you're going to beat his ass. It's got to feel good, right?
You'd imagine so. Just again, going back to the fight, Mike, what do you expect from it tomorrow night? Canelo versus Billy Joe, what are you expecting from it?
I think Billy Joe is a live dog. I think he's very underrated. He has excellent footwork, great balance. He has a great jab. He's a really good defensive fighter, but he hasn't been that active. I think that's going to hurt him tomorrow night. Canelo's been incredibly active. He fought in December. He fought in February. He's fighting again, obviously, tomorrow against Billy Joe. Canelo's the best fighter in the world, and he's one of only a handful of fighters. When I say a handful, I can only really think of Canelo and Fury, who could fight just as well going forward as they can backward. I don't know how many guys can do that, but I think you have to go with Canelo, obviously. I think he's going to be a decision victory, but I think Billy Joe is going to surprise a lot of people with his performance. He's going to win some rounds.
It seems like a lot of people think that if Billy Joe's to be successful, it will be over the cards. Nobody really expecting him to go and stop Canelo. But with that in mind, should he have any concerns about the judging? He's spoken about, his team have spoken about it as the weeks have progressed. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't think Billy Joe should be worrying about the judges. I think he should just be worrying about beating Canelo and outboxing him and outfighting him. And I think, Canelo has gotten some favorable scorecards, but he's the biggest star in boxing. That's what happens. So I hope Billy Joe gets a fair shake. You never know in Texas. But the judging, I think I would argue, is worse in your home country.
You can say that, Mike. I'm not sure many people will agree with that one. But obviously, just want to touch on Tyson Fury being here a bit more. A lot of talk about that bout with Anthony Joshua. What's your understanding, Mike? I know you've got your fingers in a lot of pies with regards to that and what's going on. What do you know about this current situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fight's really close now. Saudi Arabia obviously is going to be the site. I think the date could be August 14th. That's the date being looked at. And I think, it's going to just be up to Saudi when the fight takes place. They're the ones spending $150 million plus on this fight. But time is of the essence. If they're going to try to push it to the end of the year or something, then I think that can complicate things. But I would bet that the fight's going to be announced sooner than later for August 14th in Saudi Arabia.
Why do you think it is that it's maybe been slightly delayed then from being announced? We've had little announcements as the weeks have progressed, but not an official confirmation with a date, a site and what have you.
I just think when you get to a fight and a deal this big, that there's so many little things that have to go on, lawyers sending contracts back and forth, arguing for this, arguing for that, how many first-class fights they get, how many hotel rooms they get, how many tickets they get. And look, you've been involved in this for a long time. The bigger the fight, the longer it takes to get done. But I do think it will ultimately get done, as I've said all along.
How big is this fight in the history of a heavyweight division, in your opinion, Mike?
History? We're talking about a division that's been around since, 1880 or something? It's definitely the biggest fight since Mike Tyson fought Lennox Lewis in 2002. Probably got to be one of the top 25 biggest heavyweight title fights of all time, if not greater than that. Maybe top 10. It's hard to say because the heavyweight division is so rich in history. We're talking about Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, Max Schmeling, Thrilla in Manila, George Foreman, James J. Corbett, John L. Sullivan. Those fights in the turn of the century were massive with Jack Johnson and those guys. So I'm not a historian. I'm not going to pretend to be able to place it, but it's definitely one of the top 25, I would argue.
All right, Mike, we'll leave that then. I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. Obviously, we've got the weigh-in coming up, so as always, pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
Thanks for having me. Catch you next time.